systematic is the tendency to let's see what was I had that lined up. I forgot to write it down. Number 2. What was number 2? Oh yeah, small thing, but boy was it common. Do you remember me saying, perhaps once, perhaps twice, perhaps 500 times, you should always conceptualize population and sample separately? Don't remember that, do you? Well, I know some of you don't, because section 1, here it came, population and sample. As a heading, population and sample. And I thought to myself, well, it just goes to prove that you don't teach when you tell. And you haven't really wrestled with that enough to see why it doesn't work that way. What most of you did there was simply sketch in who you're going to deal with on your way to describing briefly the overview of the procedure. And that's okay. I don't think I want you to repeat the population description in full and the procedure for sampling in full in section 1. But for heaven's sakes, don't get in the habit of using that heading, population and sample. Use a neutral or a different orientation to that heading. And for most of you, I changed it to subjects. Subjects. In other words, who's the experiment going to be focused on? Never mind how you get them. Never mind who they represent. Never mind where they came from. You'll get that in 3. And most of what you had in that combined population and sample fit rather well under the generalized subjects, because most of you didn't do a detailed thing there. I started out correcting that and saying, divide it into 2 sections, and put this in that, put the other. By the way, what do you put in population? Most of you know, but some of you still a little fuzzy. What do you put in population? Whether 1 or 3, what do you say?
Group, do you want to generalize?
Well, not just to name the group, but that's the starting place. But the body of it is the
description.
The description. What is that population? What are they like? In other words, that's the place where you say, this is the sort of person I'm dealing with. Is it a college graduate? Is it a beginner? Is it a person who's been in jail? What is true of that population? Describe the population. That's the burden of a section called population. What's the burden of a section called sample?
Be specifically for you.
Come on, how many of you really know the answer to that one? You're right. You really know the answer to that one. Come on, get with it. The sample section deals with how you get the sample. Part of the problem with your experiment, and you had more trouble with this on the experiment than you did in the first paper. The first paper, it was obvious that you weren't going to measure everybody, but in many cases in your experiment, you were drawing from or building your study on basically a small group to start with that really didn't need to be sampled. And many of you used the whole defined population as a population of the whole, which then becomes your sample. So what is your procedure for sampling? Well, you still need a section called sampling. What would you say in it if that's what you're going to do? The sample is the population as a whole. You got it? You've got to say something about how you're going to get the actual cases that you're going to work with. And it doesn't go without saying that if you're unclear about that, it means you're going to use everybody in the population. So it has to be held down. Okay, those were a couple of really common things. A couple stylistic things and grammatical things that were still haunting you. Some of you are still throwing a lot of colons in where they don't belong. Again, I'll give you the standing rule on that. A colon follows a completed thought and then illustrates the thought. So if I come up to, we have had many cats over the years that we have had a family. Their names are very interesting, such as colon, correct or incorrect? Huh?
Incorrect.
Why is it incorrect? And it is.
You have to finish the sentence.
I have to finish the sentence. So finish the sentence for me and then put the colon in. Their names are interesting, comma, such as the following. The following. That's such as the following, which is a full thought, not truncated, such as. See, such as just drops it. You can't use a colon there. You have to go to the point where the sentence or the idea is completely expressed, and then the colon says, following here, it says, there's going to be some illustration given. And that one is still bugging some of you. Let's see. We were so rushed at the end that we didn't make the summary of the errors that we did last week. You spot some things on your paper that have been marked that... Oh, I know one. Some of you are using the style rules for entries in a bibliography, including this, I think, totally absurd notion of using lowercase for titles of books. The initial word is a cap, and then all the rest of it are lowercase. Personally, I think that's a stupid idea. But it is in the style book, and that is the way that's standard nowadays. But a lot of things in this world, I think, are standard and stupid. I mean, I have an opinion about many things that are stupid. But nevertheless, that's the way we do it. All right? Why do we do it that way? Not because it's logical, but because that's what the style book says. Now, style book is not the same thing as research, but we do have to pay attention to it. So I apologize for the stupidity of the style book. On some matters, the style book is very reasonable, very logical. On other things, I think it's somewhere near stupid. No. Okay, so you take that stupid style and then go back and throw it everywhere. So I even found this time, so help me, some of you doing headings with first word cap, all other words lowercase. Headings and subheadings. How many confess to that? And the lovely thing is you tried hard to be honest and fair and straightforward and consistent about it. Well, it isn't necessary to do that. In fact, I think it's very poor style. But if you go to your style book and you go to your style examples in your manual, your student handbook, you'll find out that that's just not done. Okay. The bibliographies this time were just really sharp. Really sharp. And several of you did a phenomenal job of handling Campbell and Stanley. I couldn't believe it. People that explained Campbell and Stanley with great insight and understanding. Not copied from the textbook, but explained it. Several of you, just really exciting stuff. The way you'd understood this and the way you presented it. We've got a lot of people in this group that are going to produce some very, very good dissertation proposals. I'm very excited about it. By the way, at lunch in this long conversation I had while we were catching our breath and eating lunch, even Margaret amused. We mentioned that one of the real evidences of worth of this course and its experience, and she's seen it with other students, she's seen it, she remembers it from herself, is how when you then take your skills from here and put together your first attempt at a proposal that you're going to take to a person that you want to introduce to what you're interested in, that paper that you can hand on the person and say, this is what I'm considering doing for a dissertation, has a chance of really sparkling. And I can tell you, if it does, you're going to get a better response in terms of who you want to work with you, and you're going to also find that there's a great deal of quickness in the uptake on getting on with it and beginning to really refine. You take a raw idea, just a general ballpark. I'd like to really do something on how they play baseball in heaven. And, there's no literature on this. We really need that. And you take that idea to Paul Hebert, for example. And Paul is apt to say, really, and other things like that. They're basically monosyllabic. And if you bring it to me, I'd have to do the same thing all the time. I mean, come on, what are you talking about? But now you say, well, I've really got an angle on this. I've really got an idea here. And I say, well, okay, let's see what the idea is. And then you spiel on, I'm still not convinced. If you bring a paper to me, that I can first of all say, And then after you leave, I'm going to see what this cockeyed thing's about, and I find something really that kind of makes sense, you know? It's an interesting insight there. You're going to be way down the road. Over against, you're going to be just simply turned off. So to use these skills fairly promptly, to begin to sharpen your own notions of what you really ought to do as a dissertation. A very, very wise thing. Now, you remember your first paper was a descriptive proposal? Most of your dissertation proposals are going to be descriptive proposals. Let me give you one word of advice. Don't hand anybody that first paper. Don't hand anybody that first paper. They're not that good. But when you get done with the course, and you've gone through the whole cycle, and you've really gotten yourself in the habit of good, careful, stylistic writing, you'll be in a good position to go back and redo a descriptive proposal, whether it's on the same topic or a different topic. You'll have the style, you'll have the framework, you'll have the understanding, and you'll be able to put together a piece that you'll be able to communicate with to one of the faculty. And the size and scope of these papers, last week and this week, are about what you would use to start with. About right. So there's a closer bearing, you see, from this work on what you're going to be doing next than you might have guessed from what I said at first, which is don't presume that you're writing your proposal. What I was trying to keep you from doing was to get too embedded in this first proposal. Because I think you know now how that could have tripped you up if you'd have, gotten that carried away in the first proposal. I really got to make this thing the best thing I've ever done, and get it ready to be my dissertation, and blah, 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 blah. And you don't get it done, it comes in late, and then you miss out on the second one, and the whole thing you don't ever develop a basis for real understanding and real refinement. There are a lot of things that we do in the experimental that give you some very, very clear notions about what really has to be pinned down in a descriptive. And there are a lot of things about a descriptive proposal that prepare you to do well in experimental. These are not two different tasks. They're tightly interrelated. And the same thing is true of the evaluative. Even though the evaluative purpose is in the administrative purpose, to inform decision making, the fact is that the precision that you have to think through a criteria for, in other words, the degree of precision needed for a good criterion statement, will do wonders for you in terms of sharpening up research questions and sharpening up hypotheses. So there's an interaction among all three. And you go down the trail and do all three and do them as well as you can. The whole thing adds up to some real competencies that you can carry away, and you'll be able to do it without having to consult with a lot of people, and especially not have to wait until a faculty advisor walks you through the process step by step. Some institutions, and this is notorious and common among the Ivy League schools and others with large faculties and small student bodies, the faculty literally take you by the hand and walk you through a proposal and correct you about 2 or 3 or 4 paragraphs a day until the thing is shaped up to be like they want you to do it. I'm not talking about design, I'm talking about what research they want you to do. Because one of the things that you'll find in the smaller institutions is a great deal of domination by the research professors of the graduate students. The issue isn't how do we facilitate what you're trying to get at, but how do we get you to believe that what you want to get at is really more effectively done as something that I want to get at. And that's one of the real bad news features of American graduate education. And it also occurs in Europe, sometimes in Europe and France and Germany, but not very often. Okay, now, open to you. Questions, comments, observations, or whatever. We broke the table last week so I could go and actually look over your shoulder and help you read what's there if you can't read it. This is your time. Any way we can help you with understanding what you got there. Yes, sir.
In essence, I'm still a little confused about what goes under definitions in section 1
Yeah.
versus what goes under precedent literature.
Yeah.
Because I put some things under definition, other things I waited till section 2, but that raised questions in section 1 about
Okay.
what are these things.
Okay, the handy dandy answer is that almost everything that is a particular element in your hypothesis that has in your study some kind of specific application or concern. For example, you say, we're going to offer the treatment variable is we're going to give them 3 weeks of the fine art of self-bathing. And this is a workshop in which we all learn to get ourselves good and clean. And so you just simply say the workshop on self-cleaning. And my gosh, nowhere in the first chapter do I find any particular notion of what this thing is. You know, is it a group event? Is it a mail-out thing? What is it? What is it? What is it? What is it? That's very important because that's your treatment variable. Now you say, wait a minute, I'm going to tell you all about that under independent variable in section 3. So your problem isn't so much section 2, but your problem is I'll wait till section 3 to do that. And you may do it real well in section 3, but the person is totally mystified in section 1. You can clear that up by putting that one into the definition. So the definitions, in effect, make sure that your reader is following all the text in 1 and all the particular usages that she or he will encounter in 3. Does that begin to answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Now don't worry about 2, because 2 is simply a statement of these are the literature bases that underlie this research. Now they may contain definitions, but they're not going to replace the definitions problem in 1, because you have to get the person successfully through 1. The person has to be able to read 1 and get a clear idea what he's using the words all right. But I was a little bit disappointed that this reference to rival hypotheses didn't come to terms with which rival hypotheses are in fact eliminated by or ruled out by time series, which is what that person was doing. Now, time series does not rule out all rival hypotheses. So it's not good enough just to list all the possible rival hypotheses and say, therefore, we're going to use the time series. Give me an example of one that clearly is not ruled out.
History.
History, very important. You can't rule out history. And some of you very correct. Some of the there's some real tigers in here that really grasp this. One person said that history will be monitored in terms of watching the experiences of these people during this period of time. In other words, monitoring the experiences. What else is going on in these people's lives during this experience? Are there any events that are apt to be important events that would shape? See, that's what Campbell Stanley was saying. The important thing is to watch, to pay attention. Some of these things can't be ruled out simply by getting a control group. That's the old thinking. And Campbell Stanley is saying you can't do it by just getting a control group. It's deeper than that. It's human experience. It's maturation. A lot of these things, you see. So history, or in effect, human experience, social experience. So the procedure for designing is a matter of systematically, notice that word, systematically ruling out rival hypotheses by putting features in your design so that they are less likely to be threats to validity. Now, let me tell you, I'm not terribly worried about this because I think a high percentage of it used your textbook. Those 2 chapters that I flagged for you, you used it well. And I want you to be prepared to do that. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, how well you've gotten along with your criterion setting task. I'd like you to haul them out. Got it? Read me a good criterion for an evaluative study. And if it's a set of 3 tell us so, and after your first one, we may ask you to give us the rest, depending on whether you really need it, and if you don't, we'll go to somebody else. Just give us one and then tell us it's one of three or four. There's nothing wrong with multiple criteria, except that quite often it needs a little extra work because you've got to actually do a testing of each criterion separately. Okay, who wants to start? Now, don't play sleepy again today. You got away with that yesterday. Yes, sir.
80% of the congregation will commit to the survey church for one more year. This is
80% of the congregation will commit to the
to continue the church planting situation for one more year.
Okay, now, does that mean giving, or does that mean just signing a statement, or what? I'm having trouble visualizing that.
You have after the interview, you have to say yes.
But what are they saying yes to?
To stay in church for one more year.
To stay in the church. Okay. So 80% of the people will express intention.
Right. Yes.
Do people ever really make a commitment to stay in church another year?
It's a church planting, early church planting situation.
Do you actually, in the name of church planting, do you get people to obligate themselves to stay in the church? It's not. What I'm challenging now is the functionality of that criterion. My hunch is that you better think through what is the behavior that you're going to look at there. Now, if it were, for example, express an intention, I would have no trouble with that.
Specific intention.
Yeah. There's a semantic difference there that worries me a lot when people commit or literally promise. There's so many things in life that come up that cause people to break their promises anyway. There's no use in setting up a situation that's going to make people feel guilty. Now, is that, as we've doctored it there, and as he's agreed to shifting it to declare an intention, is it a criterion? What makes it a criterion? Now, this is a tricky question, so stop and think about it. Don't jump with an answer. What makes it a criterion? What part of what he said convinces you that that is a criterion? Something there is measurable. Therefore, it is possible to know whether or not that criterion has been met or not. And that is really the heart of the answer. Not simply that it is measurable, but that in the measuring of it, you will be able to determine that it is a criterion that has been met. You got it? My voice may not be with us much longer. My voice may not be with us much longer.
Can you see that again? I missed the second one. Not only is measurable.
He's hoping it'll go out, right? Okay. It is measurable. And then, as we look at the whole thing, if the measurement can be done, will that in fact indicate that the criterion has been met? In this case, it's pretty clear that it is. A lot of things are measurable that may or may not really settle the criterion. Okay. Another one.
This related to evaluating the purchase of a new system for translation for a local church.
The evaluation of the system, do that again.
It had to do with the evaluation of the purchase of a new translation system. So the criteria would be that 80% of the non-speaking people will understand 80% of the sermon.
Okay, all right. Okay. Now, what kind of dynamic situation does this criterion emerge from? What are you? What decision are you going to advise?
Okay, the idea is that this church is using simultaneous translation. for,
They're using simultaneous translation, which means that people have earphones on.
with receivers. Yes.
Somebody's in a booth or at least sitting to the
Yes.
side and talking to the
Yes.
microphone and
Yes.
hearing
Yes.
and retranslating or translating the sermon instantly,
Yes.
right?
So the idea is that if it would be a good idea to buy a new system, that would be very expensive. So how can we measure that?
Okay, now,
If
do
it
you
makes
have,
sense.
you have a measure on the old system?
Yes.
Well, go ahead. What is the measure?
The idea is that.
No, the measure.
Oh, the measure would be a questionnaire.
No.
With,
Do you have a measure on the old system yet?
no, oh, I'm sorry, no, not yet.
No, not yet. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is to get a measure on the old system.
Yes, okay.
Then your criterion has to deal with how much better you will settle for, you will accept, in order to make this purchase decision. Now, you expressed it in terms of a percentage of people able to hear easily or clearly.
To understand, not in terms of the hearing, but the cognitive understanding.
Communication.
Yeah, the communication. Yeah.
The understanding, all right. Now, here's my problem. You gave me a number, 80%.
Yeah.
What is the old system operating at? And you don't answer it. So it's premature to set the 80%. Do you follow me?
Yes.
We've got to do a previous job. What have we got to do first in the study? Before we can set the criterion, we've got to make some assessment in a similar measurement system of what we got now. Now, let's assume that this system we got now is working for some people pretty well, and for others not so well. Give me a number, just make it up, that you might get if you studied this and ascertained using the same instrumentation, same procedure of inquiry. You run this once on the present system, and you find that, now you tell me, what percentage is
The
hearing well?
actual one probably would be around 50%.
All right, about 50%. All right, now what is the task for the I'm blocking words. The guys who make up the criteria. What do we call it? Stakeholders.
Stakeholders.
Thank you. What is the task for the stakeholders? They have an evidence now that the old system is meeting the needs of approximately 50% of the people who are trying to use it. All right? And people are saying it ought to be better than that. Now what's their task? What is this committee going to do?
Pretest the old system first?
No, we've already done that. We got the answer. It's 50.
They're going to
Already done.
set a higher standard.
Oh, they're going to set a higher standard than the old one. Well, that's brilliant. Absolutely. Now the question is, how much higher? Now, at that point, they may come up with a number like 80%. But I can't accept that criterion until I know what the situation is now. It may be 80% now, and people are complaining because it doesn't work for everybody. So I set a new criterion of 80%. How much improvement is that going to get us? You see, I would argue that 80% sounds pretty low in this case. Unless you're willing to set for 20% of the people to continue to complain they can't understand it.
Hey, we bought this big thing and everybody contributed, and especially me and Uncle Joe, we contributed a lot because we're pretty deaf. We still can't hear it.
And Uncle Joe and his uncle are pretty peeved. That committee has to take that into account. My point is that if you have a task to do before you know what the situation is, you dare not get into it. You've got to back up and say, what have we got now? And that's not really a committee decision. That's not really requiring stakeholders to have a meeting. You're just going to have to go out and measure. That's a technical problem. So you can know, on the basis of a previous piece of inquiry, or getting some kind of a survey. You don't even have to describe that in this study. This study just starts off. Given that we have already discovered that only 50% of the people can understand what they're getting through their simultaneous translation system, the committee has the task of deciding what the criterion should be in terms of how many people, or how many people more, do we want to include. Now, they may want, once they find out it's only 50%, they may want to just simply stop and say, it ought to be as close to everybody as we can get it. Then you have to be realistic and say, what do you mean by as close as we can get it? And there's the point where I'd say it's always a good idea to use something other than 100%. Because all it takes is one duffer to decide that he's still not hearing. Right? And human beings are like that. So I usually use percentages in the order of about 95%. Because you don't have generally more than 5% hopeless duffers in most congregations. Well, I'll take that back. Okay. That's, you see what you've done with that is to sharpen that up as a working hypothesis by conceptualizing the whole problem so that it's clear what you're going to have to start with in order to arrive at that decision about a criterion. Now, if you were to give an answer to this question today, like 95%, I wouldn't have challenged you. I challenged you only because it was 80%. And I thought, my gosh, most systems are probably operating there now. Because most of the complaints are out of about a 10% fringe, in my experience. But the same thing is true, by the way, of systems for the hard of hearing. I have some experience doing assessments there, so I know what that usually runs. Of the people that need it, about 90–95% of the people can be helped. And there's always another 5% that can't, or think they can. Like one of the old duffers that I knew one time that never would listen to the instructions on how to use the bloody thing. And he was always plugging it in wrong or twisting the knob in the wrong direction. And yelling bloody murder that this thing wasn't any good. People like that, you know, are tempting. They tend to cause you to lose your sanctification. All right, give me another criterion. Yes, sir.
At the end of Missionary Training Institute, 80% of participants will show a 25% increase in perseverance as defined in the scale.
Okay. He's got a scale that measures perseverance. And to set that hypothesis, you doggone sure better have it. And he's saying that his criterion is that at the end of this particular thing that he's evaluating, he's going to have 80% of the people who show a 25% or greater gain. Don't forget, or greater. Is that a criterion? Do something with the top part of your body. Just want to know you're awake. I mean, this business is sleep 2 days in a row. That's bad news. I'm glad Bob isn't here to see the rest of you guys. Bob and I would be embarrassed. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Let's try another. But this is good now.
General question.
And by the way, if you agree, evangelical, you put it in Greek.
You mentioned the difference between after the intention and after the behavior change. So in general, criteria that looks for behavior change is more powerful, is better.
What do you do? Do you hear the distinction? Criteria that deal with behavior manifestation or behavior change are more powerful. What other words could you use there? More, would you believe important? Would you believe important? Yeah, important. That's my favorite word. But you're right. You're right, and I would totally agree with you. That your behavior change, behavior manifestation noise, that can be then put into criteria form. These are going to be much more important. If you stop and think about it, it's a little like your mind was going right to that kind of expectation on his criterion, and you literally were taking this man's intention or turning it into a manifestation, and that makes it a stronger, more worthwhile, more important motive. Right. But it doesn't make his wrong. And it isn't bad to have both concerns. You've got to have the right spirit as well as the right behavior. But I think your point is well taken. Any others that you want to test out? Fly past? Yes, ma'am.
95% of resident assistants will have improved conflict resolution skills after 1 year experience.
Okay. After 1 year of a certain kind of experience, and you have to spell that out,
Right.
which may be a special training or maybe just a doing the job, resident supervision under some kinds of supervision. At the end of that, you expect 90%, 95, 90, what was it? 95% of these people to have come up some kind of a scale, right? You didn't say how far?
No.
Okay. Now, she didn't say how far up. And then she can define her scale. That's, if it's measurable, and you get onto the scale, fine. Okay. Now, I've got one problem with that criterion. Do you have a problem, or two or three? I have one that particularly hits me as something that's easily fixed, but it is a problem.
It's measured by?
Well, she's got that. She's saying that she's kind of, doing it with an et cetera here at the end of her statement. She says, as measured. But, yeah, let's assume she's got that in there. The problem still stands.
Need for a pre-test maybe?
Well, that's the design issue. You'd have to decide that for all criteria, whether you need a pretest. The criterion won't necessarily answer that for you. It'll give you good guidance in making your design decision. No, that's not quite right.
Mortality concern?
No, it's not even mortality. Let me tell you where to look.
How much improvement you'll settle for?
That's it. That's it. Now, here's the ridiculous extreme. Let's say we have a 100-point scale. And our pretest shows that these people are pretty generally, more or less, between 60 and 70, and we have a mean score for the whole group of 66. After a year, by golly, we check them again, the mean score is now 67. Have we met our criterion? See that? We could have met that criterion with too little gain to satisfy you. Now, at some point, you're going to have, and again, this is where pre-knowledge is going to be important. Because, for example, if the scale shows them at a 5% level, that's where they ought to start with. And you've specified a 10-point gain. You're settling too cheap, all right? But if the pre-test were to show them at the 90% level, and you ask for 10% gain, you're going to push them off the scale. You see? So before you set that criterion, you're going to have to know something about where they are now on that measure. That's the same problem that was true in yours, was it? A moment ago, where you can't set that number. You set the 80 and I said, I'm suspicious. You set the 95% are going to get there, but then you said, where is it to get? Somewhere. Somewhere in a positive direction. That's not good enough.
So it would become too much like a descriptive study if you were just looking for people to self-report that they feel that they've improved in this.
Yes, absolutely. Or if you're willing to take scores on a test of some sort. Has a lot of objectivity. And not pre-select some kind of target. Because you may get the improvements you're asking for, but in such small amounts that why have we worked this hard on that? See it? So you need some kind of a quantification of what you mean by improve. Improve how much?
After 1 year training program to lead small groups, 80% of the participants in the program will start to lead small groups.
Will what?
Start to lead.
They will start
To lead.
to lead. They will initiate leading. Okay. Let's go back to the, what were your numbers?
I have any number of participants. X number of participants in a small group, the program to training to lead small groups.
And what was your criterion?
After 1 year in this program, 8% of this
80%
will start to be.
will manifest leading style behaviors, or will seek out. Tell me what that means.
I am thinking that they will start, not manifesting.
They will have started
They will
small
have
groups.
started.
If we're talking about will have started small groups, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. That's where you need, I think I wrote on about, let's see how many people are, there were 19 papers. I think I wrote on about 21 papers. Precision, detail, and that's what we're talking about. You need to be precise in the wording of what is this criterion. Now, if let's go with this assumption that he's offering to you, that it is the assumption of will have started a small group work. Is that a criterion? After a period of time that he specifies, 80% of those participating in this experience will have started a small group work of their own. Is that right? Does that sound like a hypothesis or a criterion? It sure sounds like one to me. It's measurable, reasonable, logical, and related to the purpose of his activity. Fine.
I have a question related to that. When you write the criteria, there's lots of background information that makes a difference in how you write it. Do you put that before you come to the list of criteria, or do you put it in each one as you write it?
And the answer is you could do it either way, but you do it in some kind of a naturalistic way, because I'm asking you to write that first chapter as a kind of a record of how you got. Kind of dream it up, invent it.
And you're going to give us the categories of information that you'd like to see in it, or
In that chapter, this might be a good time to do that, because we haven't done it. If you were writing the first chapter the way that I'm suggesting, where would the criterion come? Now, ordinarily, your guidance mechanism for the study comes where? Way out front, right. Now, if your first chapter instead is a description of the process of raising the criteria, we're still going to section 1. In other words, if your section 1 is describing the process of raising the hypothesis, where would you put the hypothesis in the most logical kind of writing?
Nothing that's on this.
What is it?
Yeah.
We're really going to understand criteria.
Yeah.
Something. Why do you say at the end?
Because you're letting it emerge. So this is how you discovered it, how you put it at the end.
Yeah, if you were doing a strictly chronological, here's the way we're going to go at this, or here's the way we did go at it. First thing we did was to hear the general mandate of the concern. Then we refined that into a hypothesis by taking these steps.
You know,
Stay with me. You know what? I'm just doing that to see if you're still.
you said this is gonna do it. If you do it again, you buy me coffee in the cafeteria. Does that work?
It would take more threat than that. I'm not that flexible.
How about all of us?
All of you, you're still deciding your clothes. Okay. You don't hold up like me, pretty bad.
Take it off.
Okay. Where were we? Yeah, sequence in section 1. The most logical place to put the criterion for your evaluative study is last in section 1. Don't write that down. Because I don't want you to put it there. I want you to put it first, and then explain how you got it. That way, it'll make the whole process fit better, rhyme better, feel more comfortable, because the guidance is up front, like it should be. But the difference is, instead of giving all the definitions and all this that stuff as the main body, though you may have to do that, The main body is going to focus on how did we, think of it past tense, how did we get to that criteria? The mandate was this. The procedure we used was this. We got together a group of people that represent the operators or the decision makers in this organization in front of them, and they raised these questions, and then we got specific about quantification procedure. We got examination of our instrument if possible, and we decided that this criterion could be tested, and it would fulfill the mandate of the research. Can you imagine writing that?
Now, with Don's problem, I'm wondering how much of a
Which is
percentage.
Don's problem?
Be specific.
That's a criteria problem. I'm wondering how much improvement was appropriate.
Yeah.
Would you quote the text, the survey that she took? The process of deciding how much improvement was appropriate?
What do you think?
Well, it sounds logical to me, but who can tell?
Come on, I resent that. I resent that. I don't
The problem is with me, not you.
I see. You're just not trusting your logic indicators. Well, your logic indicator's working pretty well, I think. Sure. You've got to be specific. It's not just a matter of getting some gain, getting some change. Sometimes people say, in fact, one of you did it in your proposal. I remember so clearly. One of you uses change without indication of direction as being an inherent good. In other words, so long as this particular experience produces change. Oh boy! Oh boy! I'll tell you another funny one. I don't want to point anybody out, and I can't even remember anyway who did it. I thought it was really funny. And I did sit there and laugh out loud. And so I have to be honest with you, okay? Person did the unthinkable. Several of you did it, and I didn't mark it off in any case. I didn't even complain about it. But when you were doing your charts, you know, your open charts on section 4, several of you penciled in, not in pen, not in type, you penciled in some possibilities. You referred to it as hypothesized outcome. In a hypothetical study, why not? You know, I can tolerate that. Generally, it's not considered good style because it looks like prediction. But if you get a hypothesis and you say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an O here, and then I'm going to do an O here, and then I'm going to do an X, and then I'm going to do an O here. And by the way, the O's typically are equidistant, and the X is assumed to last in here. Okay? Some of you had your time 1 here, time 1, time 2, time 3, time 4. What's the error? This one literally is twice as long as this one, because it's 2 time blocks, okay? You can't do that. The whole idea is that this time has to equal this time. Here's what this person did. Right above this, showed possible scores, which is not a bad idea. You had the timeline down here. And then possible scores where you have a group that has gone into here, and then it goes like this. No, that wasn't it. It was this. It was like this, and then it was like this, and then the person put in another treatment and another measurement and had this. Now, imagine, okay? You tell me in just simple language what's happened here. This is the place where we started. That's a baseline. Now, what has the first test done to this score? The rival hypothesis of testing has apparently had a positive effect on that score. Now, now what's happening?
The treatment or treatment.
The treatment seems to be heading in the wrong direction, which is exactly what this person had down. But the person was really trying to promote an idea, and that was that if you just do this again, you will, and he used the word, reinforce. And this is what made it so funny. So it seems that the second treatment reinforces the first treatment. What's wrong with that language? It's not a reinforcement, it's a reversal. It's a counter effect, different from the first. A reinforcement says it did the same thing, but more so. So I said, generally, we would look at this model and say, this particular behavior is called a reversal, not a reinforcement. I thought that was extremely fun. That's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. That goes along with Einstein's statement. Yeah. Brilliant stuff. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that some of the funny stuff that we all come up with is pretty funny. And there's nothing wrong with learning to laugh at it, including learning to laugh at yourself. And when I laugh at you, it is not to put you down, it's to enjoy with you. Okay, where were we? We were doing the sequence. Okay, what other things would you then put in section 1? If you're going to start with the hypothesis. Can you tell that I'm an old, unconverted experimentalist? Okay. Start with the criteria, and then what else might we put there? I would like to suggest background of the situation. And just take your time to do a little narrative. What's the organization? What's the need for training? What's going on? What is it that you're looking at? Tell us about it. Just tell a story. And at that point, you really have to make up enough there that you're making sense. Start with some kind of real context in mind, but if you have to invent facts, go ahead and do it, so that we're left with some kind of a picture of what's going on. Okay. What else do we put in that section? We got a background of the situation, which is a good heading. What else will we use?
Overview
of how you're going to do the evaluation.
Overview of the evaluative procedure. That'd be a great place to end, by the way. These overviews work best, I think, when they come last in a chapter, because they force the writer to give all the rest of the detail before the overview. It's something you really got to stop and explain. You've already given the explanation earlier. Otherwise, your overview just gets on and on and on, full of detail, and it's just a big, long, dangling piece. Now, do we need to talk about the population? Where would be a good place to stick the population section so that it doesn't disconnect from the flow? There's a good answer to this if you think about it.
After the background?
Thank you. Perfect. You're doing a background of the situation. You can kind of lay off the specifics of the population until you get to the end of that. Just think of that as the last section of the description. What do these people like? Because the task is, what do these people like that are involved in this thing? You're going to describe it. That's the population section. Okay? What else might be put in section 1 of the evaluative study?
Maybe step over a little bit.
Very good. Describing the decision makers in the organization. Use the word stakeholder if you want to.
You use that as a section.
Yeah.
Stakeholder.
Sure. You could use that word as a section head, or you can be more explicit about it. Where would you typically put that? Now, you did a good job there a minute ago coming up with a good suggestion where to put the population. This is not really the population. This is the procedural group that make the decisions about the criteria. That's not your research population. So where would you put that?
They're part of the population, so I would put it right there after the population.
Now, they're probably, potentially at least, remote to that population. We're talking about the training program, for example. Who are the stakeholders going to be? Administrators, board, key teachers, curriculum people.
What was the mandate?
What's the background, isn't it?
It's background all right, it's background all right, but you can hold off until right before you walk through the steps. In other words, the last piece, you can put it right ahead of the last piece. And that helps you to keep your emphasis on who is being served by this program, in contrast with who is being called upon to make this decision about criteria. Generally speaking, the trainees in the program aren't the ones you think are the stakeholders. The stakeholders, the ones that decide the criteria, or the ones that influence the criteria, are much more likely to be people in the field, or people that have some kind of responsibility for this program or this institution. And the only reason you need to get them described at all is because they're in there. But you're not going to dwell on it very much. Put it too early, then people are going to expect you to do something with it. Stick it just before you get to the walkthrough of the procedure. Then you'll have it in there. It'll be clear what you're talking about, who these people are. And you can refer to them then. The only place you're really going to need to refer to them is in that last section. But they're not essential to the overview. The overview deals with the program and its purposes, not necessarily where those purposes come from or who are they accountable to. So I usually recommend sticking with it.
Aren't your stakeholders going to play a key role in determining and evaluating the criteria?
Sure. And then you've already said what the criteria are. Now you're going to walk through and show how these stakeholders fit. Because you're going to walk through the procedure. And remember the tone, the tenor, and the verb tense. So this is all retrogressive or reactive or responsive to these are the criteria and here's how they were determined. And where you need those actors, the stakeholders, is right down there as you start to walk through the procedure. Now, I'm going to tell you, that, as far as I'm concerned, I'll tell you what you can think of, how you can think of it. If you feel it, if you do it somewhat different, go for your own judgments. Muriel leaned over me a day one time and said, why do these people seem always to have the same headings, but they don't always use them in the same order? And I just snapped back and I said, because they're thinking. Because one of the symptoms of thinking is that you're not just mechanically following a model. And she chuckled and said, well, of course. But she was assuming somehow that you would all have the same order, since you had the same headings, which meant the same. I will tell you that there were headings that came in that I had never even mentioned that were well used and in the right logic. You went way beyond. It was as if I was teaching a class of people who had already been through this, and I was kind of somewhat embarrassed to find out that most of you already knew this stuff and more. And I tended not to really believe that. I tended to believe that it was something else, that you were stretching yourselves to do as well as you could with all the data and any kind of focus and reflection, putting it all together. Okay, what else might be in section?
Excuse me, about stakeholders. It seems like the book is a bit broader in the definition of stakeholder than the decision maker, as you are alluding to. So here it is, all who is involved, who could be involved, who could be inflected by what's going on.
Who's going to really determine who should be listened to in setting criteria? Who's going to determine?
You made the really passing comment there that I think hit the point. You said they're typically in the field. So it's the people, if you're training people, it's the people that those trainees are going to be going to that are going to be influenced.
In a well-run organization, that would be the case. What I'm asking you now is, let's assume it's well-run or badly run. The answer is going to be the same. Who's going to make the decision about who you, the evaluator, listens to in refining or defining the criteria? Somebody's going to be leaning on it. Who is that? narrowly, tightly run organization. It's going to be a small number of people, and they're going to have their list. In a more loosely, more democratically organized operation, they're going to say, well, go out and ask some people. Now, when Borg and Dahl put together a best case scenario, what values are they? They're thinking schools, and they're thinking well-run schools, and they're thinking responsive schools. And so they just spread that thing all out and say, why don't you get representation from all sorts of sectors? Do I think that's a good idea? I do. Do I think that works very often? I don't. The difference is I've been out there shoveling the you-know-what. And that's quite often at the requests and mandates that are sometimes narrower than what I would prefer. Now, one of my tasks quite often is to help nudge that open a little bit so we listen to more sectors. But ultimately, the question is best answered by who are these people that are going to be listened to? Which is one reason I like to put it down at the end. That's what I'm stuck with. That's what I'm going to have to work with. So it's not a contradictory observation. It's just a different presumption about the relationships in the situation. Yeah, I do a lot of translating into the frame of reference that many of you will necessarily be working. Many of you will be working in institutional functions of one sort or another that are reporting to some kind of hierarchical structure within the church. True? Does that begin to communicate why we just don't simply assume that we ought to get everybody into our stakeholder group? Anything else that ought to go into section 1? We mentioned population. What about sampling? To tell you the truth, although you may in fact be evaluating around a core of sample that you're looking at, a core sample, I wouldn't recommend in this proposal putting that in section 1. I'd save that all for section 2. Because you're going to just barely introduce it in the end of section 1. Whereas in a descriptive study or an experimental study, all of that is really important right up front. In this one, it's only important as you pragmatically work your way through this real situation with these real people in this organization. And I'm going to work that out in section 3. And I don't like to overload section 1. So you keep section 1 focused on how do we get those criteria. Anything else that ought to be there? I don't think so. I don't think so. Now, if you come up with something and want to do it, fine. But I don't think it's necessary. So if you just settle for these sections, what would you do? Where would you start? The criteria. And then immediately a paragraph that starts out by saying the criteria above were developed through a process that is described following. And then what section headings will we find following? We're going to find the background of the situation, focusing not on the evaluation, but on the program and why it needs an evaluation, or in fact, what the mandate to you has been. What were the instructions? What was the command that you're responding to? What did they hire you to do? And let me suggest that as you're doing this proposal, think of some organization where you have enough knowledge that you can kind of rationalize this and feel it through as you go to make it a lot easier. But don't put yourself in the position of the doer of this project that's being evaluated. Don't put yourself in the place of the guy who's delivering the service. Put yourself in the position of the evaluator. And the evaluator is never the person running the program. That's known sometimes as leaving the cat in charge of the canary. And that imagery works interculturally, to say, that's not the right word. Okay. After the overview, then what? And not the overview, but after the background of the situation. Then what? Population. Now, the population of whom? Of what?
People from whom you're going to get your data.
Not necessarily. The clients of this program. Because that's what you're talking about, the background of this program. This is not the background of the evaluation, that's the last section. This is the background of the program.